Hey, welcome to Christmas in July. Today we're gonna make a fake Santa cake, and he is so adorable. I'm so excited to show it to you. So the first thing we're gonna need is some of these foam discs, and I picked these up at Dollar Tree. They come 2 in a pack. I'm gonna use 6 of them, and if you don't have these, or if you don't want to go out and buy them, you could use one of those really large oatmeal canisters, and that would work too. And then we're also going to need one of these. It's almost like a cupcake base shape, but larger. And so what I'm going to do first is just glue each of these layers of styrofoam together. And I want to try to get them on as straight as possible so that the edge is nice and flat. So when you set it on there, just use your finger around the edge and just feel if it's even on all the sides. And if not, just kind of push it around while your glue is still wet. So you guys, I can't take credit for this design of this cake. I saw this as a real cake on The Icing Artist, and if you haven't seen her channel, oh my gosh, she is so amazing. You've got to go check it out. I'm going to link to this cake on her channel in the description. So I used that as inspiration. Of course, I had to do some things quite differently from a real cake, but that's where I got the inspiration for this cute design. Okay, and then this one is going to go on the top. And I'm going to try to center it as much as possible. Okay, so now I'm going to trim down a little bit of the styrofoam. So around this edge right here, I don't want this to be so sharp, so I'm just going to take my X-Acto knife and I'm just going to cut some of that off just to round it out just a tiny bit. This part's going to be the hat, and so I don't want like sharp edges under there that'll make the hat not look nice and soft. And then I'm also going to do the same to the edge of this top piece here. I'm going to set that aside for now. And then I'm going to grab my foam clay. So I have a lot of clay here. We're going to be making quite a few parts to the Santa. So I'm just conditioning my clay. So the first thing I'm going to do is make kind of like the part that comes off the side of the Santa hat. So I'm going to take a chunk of my clay, and so I'm just going to kind of shape it I don't even know what you call this shape, but I'm shaping it like this with kind of a pointy end on one end. And then I'm going to stick this to the side of the top piece of foam. And then I'm just going to kind of smooth it at the edges because I don't want it to have like a bump. I'm going to cover this in fake fondant clay. And so I just want everything to be nice and smooth. And then you can kind of shape it more however you want it to look. Just make sure that it's like even with the top of this. You don't want it like pressed up like this to where it's going to be like a bump. Okay, so that's how it looks. Okay, so now I'm going to make a ball for the end of the hat with my clay. So I'm just going to get a piece however big you want the ball to be. And just roll it into a ball, and then I'm going to texture it up with my toothbrush. And then I'll just set that aside. We're not ready for that just yet, but I wanted to get it made up. So now I'm gonna roll out a piece of clay to cover the whole edge of the cake, like around the whole cake. So just smush it out by hand to start, and then use your rolling pin and just roll it out really thin. We want this to look like fondant, so fondant is pretty thin, and you'll want it to be longer in one, like longer this way, and just make it wide enough that it'll go around this part of the cake. Make sure it's wide enough this way, but then keep rolling it out so it's long, so it'll wrap all the way around. Okay, so now I'm going to cut this to the right width so that I can just wrap it right around. So I'm going to cut one edge of this straight, and then I'll measure and then cut the other edge. So I'm going to use my clay blade, but you could use an X-Acto knife or whatever you have. If you guys want to take your fake baking to the next level, be sure to check the description below. I have a link to my VIP Fake Bake membership club, and we're going to be doing all sorts of different fake food in there. So be sure to check that out in the description. I'm just going to put the edge. And honestly, it's not going to matter if this is perfect because we're going to be putting the edge of the Santa hat around there, and so the top edge is not going to show right at the edge. So if you get it a little too small or a little too big, it's okay. Okay, so I'm going to start my seam at the back side. Just then that way I don't have to worry about it being on his face or anything super visible in case it's not completely smooth. And then if you have excess here, you can just trim that off. And then press your seam together. And then just use your finger to smooth out the lines. Some clays will do this a lot easier than others. Like Model Magic, I find it so hard to get the lines out of that stuff. This one I have is a little bit softer, so it's easier to do that. And then just press it all around. This top edge you can either trim or you can just push it up and over if you have any extra. And then the bottom, I'm just gonna make sure it's all nice and pressed in. Be careful not to get a bunch of fingerprints though when you're doing all this. And then you can just go around and smooth out anything that needs to be smoothed. Okay, so now we need to do the same thing for the hat. So I'm gonna roll out another big piece of clay. And this one will want in more of like a circular pattern rather than like a long piece. Okay, so for this one, we just want to cover the whole hat area. So just drape it over, and then we want to press it in toward that top tapered styrofoam piece, and then over that little thing that we made there. And then I'm just going to go around and trim off the extra with my X-Acto knife. So for this part, I'm just pressing it up and like around that piece that we made. Just shape it up, and then I'm going to take a toothpick and kind of get it up in there so that it has a crease where it would be flopping over. And then I'm just going to kind of smooth all this down. Like I said, this area is not really going to show, but just to not have any spots where it's like really thick or whatever. Okay, so here's my covered piece. Okay, so now I need to paint the I'm going to paint around here. This is going to be like a skin color. So I'm going to use this Apple Barrel Light Mocha, but depending what skin tone you want your Santa to have, you know, you could use a lighter or darker paint. Okay, and then next we're going to paint the hat red. So for the skin tone, I only needed one coat, but for the red, I'm gonna have to do a second coat on that one. So I'm gonna let that dry for a minute, and I'm gonna make his little nose while we're waiting. So I just have a small piece of clay, and I'm gonna roll it into a ball. And then I wanna make it kind of like an oval shape, so I'm gonna kind of press it out that way, and then I'm gonna press it down onto my surface. So we also need to make some eyes and a mouth for him. So I'm going to take another small piece of clay, and I'm going to take off one little chunk that I'm going to use for the mouth, and then I'll use the other piece as the eyes. I want the eyes to be the same size, so I'm just rolling it into a ball, and then I'm going to cut it in half so that I have two of the same size pieces. And then I'm just going to roll those into little balls and then press it out. And just make sure you get them about the same. You can always squish it in a little if it's too big on one or whatever. And those are pretty close. So now I'm going to make like a little lip for him basically. So I'm going to roll this out into a snake. This is going to be a lot more clay than I actually need, but that's okay. I'll just cut it off. Okay, and then I'm going to cut it about here. I think that'll be good size for his mouth. All right, now we just need to paint these. So for the lip, I'm going to use Cameo Pink. And you don't really need to do both sides of this. Just make sure you have all the edges. And then the eyes are going to be black. And then we need to paint the nose too. So for the nose, I'm going to do my skin tone that I use, the light Mocha, and I'm going to add just a tiny, tiny bit of pink to it. So I'm adding this pink eraser color to it. So it's almost the same as the skin tone. It just has a little more pink to it. So he can have like a rosy nose and rosy. We're going to use this for his cheeks too. So I'm just going to hot glue the nose on. My clay is still wet, but I just want to make sure that it stays. So just make sure you have it on the side that you want and just kind of put it right in the middle of his face. My pieces are still wet as I'm touching them, so I mean, you could probably wait for yours to dry. I'm just so impatient and, you know, making a video. So for the eyes, I'm going to put them wide. Same thing, we're going to glue these on. And then I'm going to put his mouth on. So I want to leave some space between the nose and the mouth a little bit so that I can put his mustache there. And then I'm just going to take my pink eraser color again, and I'm going to just paint right inside of the mouth to make it like a darker pink color. Okay, and I know he looks like a pig right now, but he won't when we're done. Okay, so the next thing is to put on our beard and our hat and eyebrows. So I have a piping bag and of course my spackle. So I'm going to be using a few different tips here. So the tips I'm going to use this tiny little just circle for his eyebrows. And then I'm going to use this 1A tip for his around the hat, the like fuzzy part around the hat. And then I'm going to use this 1M tip for his beard and mustache. So I'm going to start out with the smallest one first. And I'm just going to press it down into my bag and then just mark where I want to cut my bag to fit the tip through. And then just push the tip through. And I'm going to put my bag over glass to make it easier to fill. So I have my spackle here. I have a huge gallon of spackle. And this one is white and fluffy and beautiful, so I can use it just like this. If you have one that's more on the gray side, you'll need to add some white paint to it to make it nice and bright white. The brand I'm using here is DAP, Fast and Final. So I'm just gonna pipe his eyebrows on right over his eyes. And then the next part I'm gonna do is the beard. So I'm gonna use my 1M tip. Now, piping is not my best thing that I'm good at, so I'm gonna do my best here and hope that it turns out cute. So in Lori's video, she did like a zigzag pattern for the beard. So that's what I'm gonna attempt to do here. And then the mustache. Is just gonna be kind of like a swoosh. Or that's the idea anyway. I completely covered his mouth, so I'll have to fix that. So to fix the mustache area, in case you have the same problem as me, I'm just using a toothpick. You guys are probably better at piping than I am for sure, so maybe you don't even need to see this, but I'm going to show you anyway, just in case. And then I'll go back in and touch up the paint in his mouth after everything dries up. So I'm going to take his hair back here some. She didn't show in her video how she did the back of the cake, so I have no idea. So I'm just going to wing it with my own thing here. So I'm just take some hair back. Okay, so for the hat, I'm just going to do dots around the edge. And I'll get rid of those little pointy things after. Okay, so now I'm just gonna smooth these down. I don't want these things poking up like this. So for the front part of this, I'm gonna fill it in even more. I want it to be more drastic. I think that's why it's looking weird to me, is it's not puffy enough. Yeah, that looks a lot better. So I'm just gonna glue the ball on right on this tip here where we made it hang down. And then I'm gonna take some white paint and a tiny brush and just make one white dot on each eye. Like I said, I'm gonna need to go in and touch up this paint here where I got spackle all over his mouth. I appreciate you guys so much. I've had so much fun making this Santa fake cake with you for Christmas in July, and I appreciate your love and support, and I will see you next time.